Thank you. The reason why I'm here is because of Lucy Pryor. I have a marvelous relationship with her family, all the way from her mother and father, who were my biggest supporters. Her sister, who I still have a real place in my heart for, and we're going to connect with that. Thank you all for inviting me. Just a little bit of background that Lucy hit on. I was kind of going along in my life, and at 64 years old, one day I was in the operating room, and my person was helping me do the surgery said, "Your hand's shaking." I said, "No, it's not my hand. My hand doesn't shake." I'd always been good with my eyes and my hands, and the idea that I would be in an operating room shaking was just intolerable. And it changed the trajectory of my life to have to accept the fact that I wasn't going to be able to continue to operate for into my 70s. And you know, the story is that I went ahead and started this clinic taking care of patients with dementia. It's not quite as simple as that. There was some real soul searching because I couldn't imagine the idea that I wouldn't be in front of patients and figuring out what was wrong with them. Both my parents died of Alzheimer's disease, and one night I was just thinking about somehow in life, when things were really hard, sometimes we suppress those thoughts in those times. But yet those are the times that really, when we were at our best, we had to work through things. We had to dig deep and see if we could find a way to deal with the suffering and the pain. And I didn't have any answers for my parents because it was really hard to take care of them. At that time, the doctors tried, but they really didn't have the skill. They had the desire to do it. They just didn't have the skill. And so I had this idea. I said, I'll tell you what, I know. Here I am kind of going through this struggle. And then it connected me with the struggles when my parents were alive. And I said, I'll start a clinic taking care of patients losing their memory. So I went to my wife. I said, Mary, I got this great idea. And she says what all Irish wives say to their husband: "You've been drinking again." She said, I have this thing where I'm talking to young surgeons or young doctors, and I say, all compassion begins with competence. You can't help someone unless you have a skill. They have their families to hug them. So you need to be good at something if you say that you want to be compassionate and impact other people's lives. And she turned to me and she said, that's what you say, and you don't have any experience in this. So I went online, looked up Centers of Excellence, Dementia, East Coast. 3 places came, and I went to each one of them. And surprisingly enough, as highbrow a lot of medical institutions are, and here is a 64-year-old guy, I wrote a letter to each one of them when I applied, and I said, when a 64-year-old man or a physician or a burned out heart surgeon applies for a dementia fellowship, it prompts the question, shouldn't he be in the clinic rather than starting? All 3 places accepted me, and I spent 4 months at Johns Hopkins. And then I came back to Charlotte, and all of the training at Hopkins was on the patient. That we would go right into the 7 stages, what stages are, what medications are they on, what type of behavior are they exhibiting, and we just focused on that. And that was a good basis for getting me started. But I realized as soon as I got back home and I started to take care of these patients, I could not help these patients unless I made the families and the caregivers better at caring for them. So that's how all this started. One of the things that has been amazing is that when I was doing surgery, I could fix things. People come to you with problems, sometimes big problems, and you get to fix it. It's great, you know, 99% of the time, everybody's happy. But these last 10 years, I couldn't fix one thing. The day in 1906 that Dr. Alzheimer described his August Dieter, the patient, and he looked at her brain when she died underneath the microscope. I don't have any more potential of impacting the disease than he did on that day in 1906. Now, there are some things that are coming, but they're not there yet. But it's very interesting because this last 10 years of my life have probably been the most rewarding as far as my medical career is. And it's very simple. And I think that's a lesson that you can do big things, but it's actually the walk with the people that are suffering and the proximity to what's going on in these homes and taking my patients all the way to the end. I really never impacted the disease. Now I can impact the depression, I can impact the behavior, and sometimes just being there with them would change the whole chemistry. Dr. Edwards is here with us. This must be very important. And so these last 10 years have changed me as a person and as a physician. So I need a little help. I'm just going to look at the notes here. All right. Today we're gonna come at this from a different angle. Okay. Almost all the time in caregiver stuff, people talk about stress reduction, how you sort of keep yourself, get away, get respite, and all that stuff. We're going to get into it today, and I'm going to talk to you about the emotional toll that being a caregiver demands on people. I'm going to talk to you about the ideas and the thoughts that you have in your mind that try to keep you in the road and sometimes let us spin off into wherever we go. We're going to talk about the nuts and bolts, the emotions, the compassion, the connections to the patient. We're going to cover panic, despair, then resilience, and then finally survival. Unless you die early, everyone in this room will either be a caregiver or be the recipient of the care of a caregiver. So we all have skin in the game, all right? So listen up. Alzheimer's and related disease, Parkinson's especially, are unique among the medical diseases because, for instance, heart disease. Let's say someone has a really bad heart problem. And they're going to have to go under a pretty big operation. Family comes together, patient gets ready to go through the operation, and 99 and 44/100ths time they recover, and then they go back to their life. They go back and, their heart's fine, everybody's happy. With Alzheimer's and dementia, that's not what happens. The day that the diagnosis is made, everyone involved's life have changed forever. The family acutely is going to have to watch a slow decline. And then when it's over, those same family members have to go off and carry what they fear is a genetic link to what I've seen. And is this going to happen to me? Every day, every week in the clinic, I'll go every 2 weeks. Shelley knows. We'll get someone to call and they'll say, I've got this. I know it. I've got it. And I'll say, well, no, wait a minute. I've known you for a long time. I'm not so sure. And they said, well, look, my parents had this and you won't believe what happened yesterday. A lady called me and she said, I backed up into someone and had a little fender bender. And I thought, okay, that can happen to anybody. But then I took my husband's car to the body shop to see if they could fix my dented car, which was at home. She said, I've got this. I know I have. Well, what I have to do a lot of times is just reassure people that this is just, and I have a talk about things not to worry about. And we can talk a little bit if we get in that today. One of the things about dementia is the social stigma, okay? And it affects not only the people that would be in your life, but it affects you in sort of almost an embarrassment that we've got this, okay? There is a lady in Charlotte named Kathy Izzard, and she wrote a book called The 100-Story Home. And it's a story about her mother having a break with reality because of bipolar disease. And she makes the point that in her small town in Texas, if you have a stroke or a heart attack, your house is full of people, full of food, and everybody is there to support you. If you have dementia or Parkinson's, no one there. They're gone. They want to be there. And it's not that they don't care. It's they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. They're as uncomfortable as you are. It's a lonely walk. And she wrote this great line. I wish I had written it. And she says, there are no casseroles for crazy. And that's what we deal with. No casseroles for crazy. It also, when you read an obituary, like I did, I wrote, I guess I'm looking for my own obituary these days, but it's always a epic battle or a courageous battle against cancer or a courageous battle against heart disease. It's rare when someone has a pathological mental disease like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or any of the Parkinsonian plus that you read about courageous battle. And yet in my life, in these last 10 years, I've never seen more courageous battles. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So the 10 years that I've spent really in these people's lives, in these patients and caregiver lives, everything that I know about caregiving, I know from personal experience that caregivers have taught me. Okay? Listening to them and seeing what works. I read some of the caregiver literature, and I am absolutely appalled at how disconnected it is, how it doesn't offer any insight into what's really going on. So I've developed 5 stages of caregiving, right? And it's coming at it from a different way. We'll see how this works. And I'll be interested to see if this hits any funny bones or soft places in your hearts. Stage 1, before there are overt signs of any dementia, these people are normal. Okay. All forms of dementia have affected patients in their relationships with others or with the world for long before you know it. Okay. This is especially true in a disease called FTD, frontotemporal dementia, and especially in Parkinson's. If you have a REM behavior disorder, it means you act out your dreams, or that you have sleptwalked as a young child, you have a 40% chance of developing Parkinson's in your lifetime. So this has been there for a while. Why are we late in recognizing dementia in a loved one? The first point is that communications kind of break down. That and this is really important. And for some reason, we oftentimes lead parallel lives. And when someone has a subtle change in their perspective or in their behavior, we tend to try to find another reason. Oftentimes, my patients will say, well, Dad really has never been the same since he retired. Well, actually, if you look at what the symptoms were that he was having, it was dementia that had already started to creep in. Social skills are late to go. Oftentimes, they're the last thing to go in Alzheimer's or especially in vascular dementia. People will be totally normal. And I usually give it the 5-minute rule. Okay, you're talking to an 86-year-old lady, and she's telling a funny story, and she is just the cutest thing you've ever seen. And you say, boy, I hope I can be just like her when I'm 86. And you come back after a few minutes, and she's telling the same story, and you know she's got it down. Usually, you end up talking about what patients with Alzheimer's and dementia want to talk about, and part of it is on us because the social stigma of having to admit that we've got a problem is almost intolerable. It's saying, I'm not going there, okay? Distance. I did actually a podcast on this. Distance, the phone is your enemy because of an entity called confabulation. Now, confabulation is lying, but in medicine, we're being a little kinder, and we call it confabulation because they're not really lying. It's actually reality. But my brother, Mark, is a 3-star admiral. Okay, he's got 25 people around him walking everywhere he goes. And when he says something, everybody's got to listen. So he calls me on the phone and he says, Chuck, this business, if you tell me Dad is losing it, I'm not getting it. I just had the most marvelous conversation with him. He's watching, he loves the Chicago Cubs. He's watching the Cubs. And, he just played golf yesterday. I said, really? You did? Uh-huh. He said, I think you're overreacting to this. I said, okay. But I will tell you, Dad hasn't played golf in 18 months. And also, he hadn't paid his taxes in 3 years, okay? We're going to send you a bill for that. So he said, well, all right, let me see. I'm gonna come and I'm going to stay with you and Mary. And I said, no. You stay with Mom and Dad. And let's just see how that goes. You call me 20 minutes into the season. You know how messed up this is? Right. So the early signs, patients become quiet. They become self-absorbed. They have an entity called emotional blunting. What emotional blunting means is a person loses the capacity to love. Oftentimes there's confrontation, maybe some anger, and you're trying to explain, and this is long before any diagnosis is made. But what happens is that the marriage, the relationship, that sort of magical bond that makes it all work, or the father-son or father-grandchildren, that bond is gone. And then as a family or as a caregiver, here the relationship has already been marred. And then you're asked to take on this gargantuan role of caring for this person. And so we have to understand that going in as a caregiver, the relationship with the person often has already been altered. Okay. Now, why, especially in Parkinson's, I have a list of the 10 non-movement symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And I have it in a row, and I have it on a piece of paper like this. And when we do our initial evaluation, when I go in with Shelley and we're going to examine the patient, I hand this to the caregiver or the family. And when I come back, they're almost always in tears, almost always these emotional outbursts. And the reason is because oftentimes the wife had thought the patient with dementia or Parkinson's had stopped loving her, or vice versa, or the relationship had changed so much, and all of a sudden they have that proof that it's the disease that marred the relationship, not the fact that they stopped loving me. Now, it doesn't change the situation, but it helps my caregiver shoulder this burden a little bit better. All right, stage 1, that the relationships are challenged, and this is long before we see anything, okay? But it's very important to realize that the disease has been affecting you, even as a daughter or as a son, as a brother, and you have to reequate. The second thing is, the second stage is what I call wishing and hoping. All right. How many people have ever heard of Dusty Springfield? All right. I got an age-related group here. All right. So Al David and Burt Bacharach wrote a famous song for Dusty Springfield called Wishing and Hoping. Okay. It was a huge hit. And stage 2 is we're into this, but we don't know it, or we're afraid to admit it. And so the tune, Wishing and Hoping, is sort of the theme that encapsulates exactly what happens in stage 2. All right. It is before you have overt evidence, but there are lapses. Okay, and early in stage 2, I've got this marvelous lady that was taking care of her husband. He was one of my closest friends. And she said, it was strange. I always did dinner and he always did the dishwasher. And all of a sudden he kept putting the glasses straight up in the dishwasher. And I'd say, honey, they fill up with water. Can you just put the glass down? Well, she would kindly remind him he couldn't retain it. And that was her first sign when she went back to look at what had happened. So what we have early on is just a very few lapses. But what it does, it takes, you're on a roller coaster. A day with no lapse, you are feeling good. I'm back to normal. Don't really worry about this anymore. And then a day with 2 lapses, you come crashing down because you see where your life is going. You don't want to, but you do. So the takeaway from stage 1 is sort of confusion. Is this really happening? Or what confusion? I don't know what's happening. The takeaway from stage 2 is initially anxiety. And then as we work through it, at the end, it's fear, because the lapses are occurring more and more. And even though you don't want to admit it, and that social stigma is there, we're in it. This is usually, so we're on this giant roller coaster. Something's not right. And so that puts us right in the middle of stage 3, in the trenches. This is when there's no way that we can deny that we're dealing with a person that is cognitively impaired. This is when we see all of the behavioral stuff. We start to see anger. We start to see the resistance. Almost every person, there is a fundamental fear that comes out in stage 3, okay? And almost every person, I would say close to 99% of people who have any type of cognitive issue, especially Alzheimer's or related dementia, has a basic fear that if anybody knows how bad I am, I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be in a place I can't get out of. So when you correct them, they're going along and you say, wait a minute, Dad, I don't think that's right. What do you think you get? You get I don't want anybody to know, so you get anger. And so oftentimes stage 3 is when we first see patients that have dementia. And that's when all of this stuff comes gushing out. And they'll say, I can't correct my wife at all because she will get furious at me, okay? So this is where the triangulation occurs. That I always ask the question, what percentage of the time for the caregiver, what percentage of the time are you a caregiver, and what percentage of the time are things normal? If you ask someone in stage 2, they will tell you, oh, 95% of the time, we're normal, we're cool. Get to stage 3, you go from 95% to say that we might be normal 10% of the time. It goes to 90%, just boom. Did I drop this? Well, I'm missing 5 here. Here we go. All right, so what we see, I'm almost back to normal here, guys. Give me a break. I should be in the clinic. I'm gonna find 7 before I go any further. All right, so don't get nervous. I'm not gonna. It's not that long. Okay, it's not that long. I'll be out of here in no time. There's no denying it, and so the percentage of caregiver, and then this is where we see a lot of the behavioral issues, and we get into strategies of How do we deal with it? I call it triangulation. You no longer can deal directly with the patient. You have to triangulate, meaning how can I avoid anger or avoid some sort of um, of, of odd behavior if I don't say this or I come at it in a different way. It's no longer direct. Dad, don't do that because it just doesn't work. Okay. And this is where it's exhausting. We begin to see delusions. Delusions are false fixed beliefs. And the patients will start to have, and they're usually in a pattern, okay? People are stealing my stuff. They lose things or they hide them. People are stealing my stuff. I don't live here. I live somewhere else. Not living here means that they're going to wander, okay? It is just absolutely. There's a entity called reduplicative paramnesia where patient has the delusion that I don't live here, but I live in a place exactly like this, but it's somewhere else. They are going to go. They're going to go find that place. I have one lady that drove her husband around Charlotte looking for the place he lived at. Also, there's an interesting delusion called capgras. Capgras is that a spouse or someone that's very close to them has the delusion that they have been replaced by an imposter. Who are you? You cannot be my husband, John. You are another John. Now you say, God, this seems odd. It happens more than you can imagine. And it is terribly, especially for women, it is terribly damaging because here this relationship is gone. He doesn't know who I am. I write a lot about it in the second book, Late Fragment, and I give an example of how devastating it is. My parents are coming to visit, and you're saying your parents have been dead for 30 years. Well, delusions are fixed beliefs, fixed.
Yeah, you're getting close.
All right. What time do they have to be out of here?
10:45. Oh, 10:45? I thought you said 10.
No, if there's time for questions. you can
So the delusions are so upsetting because if you just have a memory issue, you can supply the answer. Where are we going? Well, we're going to go to the office and we're going to see Dr. Edwards this morning. Where are we going? We're going to the office to see Dr. Edwards. When it's delusion, it's full-blown crazy. Okay, you can't explain it away. Here he is thinking, my mom and dad are coming for dinner, and he wants to know what you're going to fix. My mother loves macaroni and cheese, and you're going, you got to be kidding me. I can't believe we're at this point. All right, the takeaway from that is absolute exhaustion. This is one of the most important things that I'm going to talk about today is late stage 3 or stage 4 is what I call after the switch. All right, the switch is you don't throw it, but it is thrown for you. Okay, and that switch is that your perspective on this illness and your relationship with this patient fundamentally changes. And it's a human protection that you take your emotions and some fundamental compassion and you take it away. You get off of the roller coaster. You become a manager. All right. You make sure the patient is calm, safe, and clean, and you've got a checklist. But I'm not going on the roller coaster. Every time you're doing good, I'm feeling good. And then when you're doing bad, I'm desolate. I'm not doing that. And then when that switch is thrown, and sometimes that switch might be thrown on a Monday, and on Thursday you're back and you're okay. But once that switch is thrown permanently, the patients, especially my caregivers who are exemplary, start to feel terrible about themselves. They absolutely, there's tremendous self-loathing. I can't believe that I don't have the same affection for this person. I don't have this same compassion. It's different. I'm going to manage this, but it's not there. And this is when all of a sudden questions pop into our brain. How long can I do this? I'm gonna be glad when this is over. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. I just wish that my husband or wife is dead. And you feel awful. It is human. It is part of the caregiver experience, and understanding it. The reason why I'm going over this, of course, is because it's so damaging. We see it all the time. And sometimes it needs counseling, sometimes it doesn't. But just realizing that this is just being human. We're all trying to get through this. All right. I got to get to stage 5. Y'all gonna kick me out. All right. Stage 5, after the patient dies. Now, just to make matters worse, 30% of caregivers die before the patient. Okay. Now, in our experience, it's not quite that high, but you really don't need that piled on. Okay. Usually that's the spouse husband thing. Okay. Usually, well, a caregiver who was exemplary that we took care of came to me afterwards, and we always connect. And if we feel like that there's an abnormal grief reaction going, we start counseling. But he says to me, for the past 11 years, my raison d'etre in life has been caring for my wife, and now she's gone. And I've got this giant space in my brain. What do I do now? What is it that I'm supposed to do? I don't feel like doing anything. So my advice is, one, we're not going to do anything. We are not going to do anything. It might take 3 months. It might take 6 months. It might take a year. We're just going to get up and we're going to try to look for some positive things. We're not going to decide to move. We're not going to sell our house. We're not going to do anything crazy. We're just going to exist. I have a metaphor that I use, is that when someone dies that you love, they go into a room in your brain. And when you are early on after their death, you live in that room. You're in there with them. Okay. And then gradually, as time goes on, and we start to realize that there's love and purpose outside that room, then we come out and we start to reconnect. Abnormal grief reactions are the people that never leave that room. Now, why I like the room metaphor is because when you go back to life and you turn toward the living, there's a little bit of guilt by saying, you know, I love this woman or I love this man, and I don't want to forget them. So therefore, the metaphor is you can go back in that room. And anytime you go back in the room, you're going to have this marvelous feeling of being with them. You're going to have a little bit of heartache that they're not with you, but you'll never have them be gone from you. Okay? They're always going to be in a place. So therefore, it allows you to turn toward the living, but carry them with you. Okay? All right. I want to read. There's one thing, and I know I've been a little bit negative, but there's one thing that I want y'all to realize as caregivers or as people who counsel. There is a gift. There is a gift that's given to us that have been caregivers and who have suffered through that. And this is sort of an end tag on a story about a man named TR, who was an exemplary caregiver for us. And I describe his situation in the book. But I'm really trying to get at what I call the concept of wonder. It's transfiguring attentiveness, meaning that our lives have been absolutely glued onto one thing. Transfiguring attentiveness is being aware of what's going on in real time about the humans that are in life and what's going on with them. For me, it is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And when you are a caregiver, that's what you're doing. You're just an ordinary person. You've got this patient in front of you. Things get crazy as hell, and yet you persevere. here's what I wrote about this. What does this have to do with wonder? The transfiguring attentiveness shows itself differently in each of us. In TR, who is the person I described, it is in his total submission to her agenda and needs. It is endured through anger, defiance, obsession, and defeat, all of which took him to the limits of his own sanity. His battle against the disease has been elevated to the extraordinary by his rage against her decline and by his dedication to her. For me, being in on this, because I say earlier that TR and I shared the fact that we both loved his wife. She was amazing. For me, the wonder in this, the transfiguring attentiveness, is being so deeply immersed in this struggle. Without the wonder and resilience of the human spirit, it's just tragedy and despair. After the ordeal is over, the caregivers have been transformed. They are emboldened by having survived and know that life has nothing more tragic to throw at them. The experience, the suffering, has opened avenues of emotion and understanding that has made them even more aware, calmer, and stronger. This added dimension of the human experience is the gift that wonder offers those who pay attention. All right, I'll stop there and let y'all ask me some questions.